The winds screamed across the frozen land of Varela Prime. The cold was sharp, biting into anything it touched. Snowflakes sparkled like little stars under the twin suns that hung low in the lavender sky. Captain Ryan Thorne stood at the edge of a vast glittering wall made entirely of crystal. This was Zephyrian, the capital of the Etherians, a race born of ice and beauty. Ryan's dark uniform stood out against the pale world around him, his coat snapping in the wind, his boots buried ankle-deep in snow. He had been sent here by the Intergalactic Union to speak of peace, but it seemed the Etherians had other plans. As he approached the towering gates, a shape emerged from above. A creature unlike any he had ever seen stepped forward. Its body, like sculpted snow, eyes glowing blue, each breath sending clouds of frost into the air. Atop it sat a woman, proud and still. Her hair shimmered like starlight, flowing freely in the wind. Her armor was carved with ancient symbols that glowed softly, and in her hand she held a glowing spear. Her eyes locked with Ryan's, cold and commanding. "You will go no farther, Terran," she said. Her voice was sharp as the ice around them, yet something about it struck him. Not fear, but curiosity. She didn't look like a soldier. She looked like a queen carved from the very mountain behind her. Ryan didn't move, didn't show fear. Instead, a small smirk curved his lips, the same one that had irritated so many during his career. "I've come in peace," he said. "Your council called for talks. I'm here to begin them." The woman laughed, and it sounded like breaking glass. "The council may have called, but we follow the old ways. No outsider enters Zephyrian without passing the triad of proof. Only those who prove strength, wisdom, and spirit may enter." The frost beast growled beneath her, taking a slow step forward. Ryan held his ground. He'd faced worse than death. What he feared more was wasting time on empty ceremony. "And if I pass these trials?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow, her gaze lingering. "Then we shall see if a Terran is truly worthy." Her name was Valera, Warden of Zephyrian. She was more than a warrior. She was legend among her people. Ryan studied her, saw the way she watched him not with hate, but with judgment, testing him without moving. He could feel the weight of what lay ahead. But he had not come all this way to turn back. "I'm not here just for treaties," he said. "I'm here because I believe in building something stronger. You want proof? Then tell me what I must do." For a brief moment, something shifted in Valera's expression. A flicker of interest, maybe even hope. "The first trial is combat," she said at last. "No killing. First blood or surrender. But be warned, human. We do not fight with mercy." The frost beast stepped back as she dismounted in a smooth, fluid motion. Snowflakes danced around her as she landed, and her glowing spear hummed in the air. Ryan unfastened his coat, revealing a light armor beneath. His hand dropped to the hilt of his blade, the blue glow of its plasma edge lighting the ground beneath him. He gave a respectful, half-mocking bow. "Shall we begin, Warden?" he asked, voice steady. The wind roared around them, and the cold bit harder. But neither of them noticed. Their eyes were locked. The trial had begun, not just of strength, but of something far deeper neither of them could name yet. The arena of Zephyrian shimmered. Under the pale suns, its walls made of smooth, glowing crystal that reflected every movement like a mirror of light. Ryan Thorne stood at one end, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. The floor beneath him looked like polished ice, but it held firm, giving him steady footing. Across from him, Valera removed her heavy cloak and handed it to an aide. Her silver armor clung to her body like second skin, and in her hand, The long spear pulsed with soft, cold light. She gave him a nod that was both a warning and a challenge. "No death," she said, her voice calm. "But pain is part of the lesson." Her words hung in the air like frost. Around them, silent figures watched from the arena walls. Etherean, warriors, and a few human observers, each one waiting to see what this strange match would bring. Ryan drew his blade slowly, letting it hum to life. The blue light of the plasma edge glowed in rhythm with his breath. "Ladies first," he said, giving her a small bow. Valira didn't waste a moment. She surged forward like a wave of ice, her spear moving so fast it blurred. Ryan barely blocked the first strike, their weapons clashing with a sound that rang like bells. Sparks flew, lighting up the arena floor in quick bursts of color. He stepped back, then forward, finding his rhythm. Her attacks were graceful but sharp, like a dancer with a blade. Each move flowed into the next, and it took all of Ryan's focus to stay on his feet. He responded with a sudden swing, testing her guard. She met it with ease. "You leave your left side open," he said. She answered with a twist of her spear that nearly caught his shoulder. "Then stop talking and make me close it." They moved across the arena like storm and fire, his steps heavy, hers light and fast. The sounds of their battle echoed through the crystal walls, but still, no one spoke. Every strike felt personal, every dodge like a secret shared. Ryan found himself admiring how her body moved with such control, how each motion seemed built from years of training and something more, something almost beautiful. "You're holding back," she said during a short pause. "So are you," he replied. "What are you afraid of?" She narrowed her eyes, then laughed. "Worried about your pride, Terran?" "Worried you'll fall for me if I show off too much," he replied. Then launched a sudden flurry of attacks that forced her to give ground. Their weapons locked again, and this time they were close, too close. Her face was just inches from his, her breath cool against his cheek. In her eyes he saw the flicker of something unfamiliar. Curiosity, maybe, or confusion. "Ryan," she said quietly, testing the name for the first time. "Show me what else you can do." He nodded, and their battle changed. They no longer fought like enemies but like equals, like two warriors learning each other's strengths. Ryan spun, moved, twisted, his style not like other soldiers. His steps were strange, graceful, trained by more than just war. "You've studied dance," Valira noticed, catching a turn he used mid-strike. "On New Tiberius," he answered, breathless. "A monk there made me study ballet, said it would teach me balance." Looks like he was right. The crowd had grown still, captured by the strange rhythm between them. Even Valira's frost beast watched with what looked like quiet interest. When the final clash came, it wasn't planned. Ryan moved low, sweeping her legs. Valira twisted mid-air, bringing her spear around. They landed together, her spear near his heart, his blade at her throat. No one moved. Their bodies were locked, breaths short, eyes wide. "Draw?" he asked. "Draw," she agreed. But they didn't step back right away. Something had shifted. Something neither of them was ready to admit, but both had clearly felt. As the crowd clapped, Valira stepped away at last, her gaze never leaving his. "You fight well," she said softly. "But this was only the first step." Ryan smiled. "Then lead the way, Warden." The grand hall of Zephyrian glowed like a dream made of crystal. Towering pillars rose into the sky, catching the soft shine of the twin suns above, casting colors across the room like a rainbow trapped in glass. Captain Ryan Thorne adjusted, the formal robe given to him by the Etherians, a deep blue fabric threaded with silver lines that mimicked the frost patterns found on their mountain peaks. The evening was a celebration, meant to honor the trial he had just passed and to open discussions between his people and the Etherian Council. But Ryan could feel the weight of more than politics in the air. Eyes followed him as he stepped into the hall. Some curious, some cautious, others simply surprised. No outsider had ever stood here before, let alone survived a trial with the warden. When he met the gaze of the council elders, their expressions were unreadable, though a few of them nodded in quiet approval. Then the room grew silent. All heads turned as Valira entered. She moved like a force of nature, wrapped in a gown made of what looked like living crystal. The delicate beads in her hair shimmered with every step, and the light followed her like a shadow. Ryan felt his breath catch. She wasn't just beautiful, she was powerful, and tonight she didn't look like a warrior, but something close to a goddess. As their eyes met across the room, something passed between them, a flicker of something too complicated to name. High Elder Sorel, the oldest among the Etherian leaders, raised his hand. "First Warden," he called out, "we were speaking of your duel with the human. Please, join us." Valira moved with her usual quiet grace, walking straight to Ryan's side. "I trust the lesson was informative, Captain," she said with a small smile. "More than you know," Ryan answered. "But I've always preferred hands-on learning." The dinner that followed was filled with bright colors, glowing food, and strange tastes that danced across the tongue. Some dishes shimmered like light itself, while others cooled the mouth like snowfall. Ryan found himself seated next to Valira, their shoulders almost touching. All around them, politicians spoke in quiet tones, trading questions about weapons and technology under the polite cover of conversation. But Ryan barely heard them. Valira's voice was soft as she leaned closer. "Your fighting style is unusual for a soldier." "I had unusual teachers," he replied, matching her quiet tone. "Some were monks, others were outlaws. One even taught me to move like a dancer." "A dancer?" she asked, her silver eyebrows rising. "There's power in grace," he said, "just as there is danger in beauty." Their eyes met again, and for a second the room around them faded. Beneath the table, he felt her foot brush lightly against his. "For diplomatic purposes," she whispered, and for once, Ryan had no clever reply. The night stretched on, but time felt strange in the city of ice and light. As guests left the hall in groups, the two of them stayed behind, speaking not of treaties or plans, but of stories, of childhood memories, of distant planets they had each visited alone. Their guards had lowered, the masks had slipped, and when they finally stood to leave, the closeness between them had changed. It was no longer unspoken. In the quiet of the hallway, she turned to him, her voice just above a whisper. "There is more to our trials. Much more." "I'm ready," he said, stepping closer. "But what if I told you I wasn't just here for duty?" Her gaze softened. "Then I'd say, you've passed the second test already." Their hands met, not as enemies, not even as allies, but as two people from different worlds, suddenly walking in the same direction. The morning sun rose gently over Zephyrian, its pale light shining through the crystalline towers and painting soft colors across the frozen sky. Captain Ryan Thorne stood at the edge of a deep cavern carved into the heart of the mountain. It was time for his second trial, a test of wisdom and endurance. Around him, the air was quiet, but heavy with expectation. Above the entrance, dozens of Etherians and human diplomats gathered in the viewing gallery, including the Council of Elders and Valyra, who stood with perfect calm. Her eyes found his, and without speaking, she offered him a look that was both challenge and encouragement. He nodded once and stepped inside. The cavern swallowed the light almost instantly. Within moments, Ryan found himself surrounded by walls of glowing crystal, each one humming with soft musical tones. This was the Crystal Maze, a sacred place that tested more than strength. It tested a person's heart, mind, and instincts. Each wrong turn would awaken the ancient guardians of the maze, powerful constructs made of hardened light and Etherian energy. To escape, he would have to follow the crystal's song, a tune only the soul could truly understand. The first stretch was disorienting. Light bounced from wall to wall, making it hard to know where the path truly led. Ryan paused, breathing slow, focusing not on sight, but on sound. Faint music echoed through the corridors, a soft harmony that rose and fell like a heartbeat. He stepped toward it, letting it guide him. At first, the path was calm, but it didn't last. From the shadows, a figure formed, a crystal guardian, shaped like a giant with arms like blades. Ryan raised his sword just in time, meeting its strike with a clash that rang through the maze. The fight was fast and brutal. He moved with precision, recalling the rhythm of his duel with Valyra, using her grace as a memory to shape his motion. The guardian faded into light after he struck its core. The path ahead glowed brighter, urging him forward. As he moved deeper, more guardians came, faster, smarter, harder to beat. But Ryan began to understand their pattern. They didn't fight with anger. They fought with balance. He stopped fighting them as enemies and instead treated each one like a dance partner. His strikes became smoother, his choices sharper. The crystal maze was not meant to trap, but to teach. Above him, Valyra watched with growing wonder. He wasn't forcing his way through, he was learning the rhythm of the maze, learning its language. High Elder Sorel stood beside her and murmured, "He does not push forward blindly like the others before him. He listens." Valyra smiled slightly, pride warming her usually cool expression. "That is why he will succeed." Inside the maze, Ryan reached the final chamber. It was vast, with shifting crystal floors and floating platforms that moved when he stepped on them. One mistake, and he would fall into the freezing abyss below. The music here was louder, deeper, and more complex. He closed his eyes, listened, and began to move. Each step was like a note, each jump a chord. His body flowed with the maze's song. At the last leap, he laughed, a true, full laugh of joy, as the final platform lifted him to the exit. When he stepped out of the maze, light exploded across the viewing chamber, and the crystals themselves began to hum in harmony, reacting to his success. The watchers stood in stunned silence. No one had ever seen the maze respond to a human before. Valyra was the first to move. She descended the stairs quickly, and without hesitation pulled him into a fierce embrace. "You continue to surprise me," she whispered. Ryan held her, close, the bond between them no longer just a spark, but a fire burning strong. "I hope I never stop." And as the others began to speak of alliances and diplomacy, the only thing Ryan could think about was the way her voice had trembled when she said those words. The sky above Zephyrian was soft with morning light as Captain Ryan Thorne stood once again at the top of the crystal spire, facing the final and most dangerous trial. This time, there was no sword in his hand, no puzzle to solve, no maze to walk through. Instead, he stood alone on a high platform of solid crystal, with nothing but wind around him and a steep drop below. Valyra stood nearby, mounted on her frost beast, Crystal Wind, her expression calm but her eyes sharp. Around them, both human and Etherian officials filled the balconies and observation towers, their voices hushed, their attention focused. Today's challenge was unlike the others. It required no combat or cleverness. It asked for something deeper. Ryan had to form a bond with a wild frost beast, not control it, not tame it, bond with it. The beast had to choose him freely, to see something in him worth trusting. If it didn't, the trial would fail, and the consequences would be more than just diplomatic disappointment. The beast released for the trial was massive, larger than Crystal Wind, with thick white fur and glowing blue eyes that burned like fire. It stepped onto the platform with silent strength, each paw leaving behind a trace of frost. Ryan stood perfectly still, letting the wind tug at his coat. Slowly, he removed his outer armor, piece by piece, until he stood in simple clothes, open to the cold. The crowd stirred with surprise. Valira said nothing, but her lips pressed together tightly. The frost beast circled, its breath visible in the air, its growl low and warning. Ryan raised his hands, empty and open. "I'm not here to fight you," he said softly. "I'm here to understand." The words weren't for the audience. They were for the creature. The frost beast paused, ears flicking. "I know you've seen others try to force you. I won't. You remind me of her. Strong, proud, unwilling to bow. She didn't let me pass easily either." The beast stepped closer, its heavy breath frosting the air between them. Its eyes searched him. Ryan didn't move. He didn't speak again. He simply held out one hand, palm up, fingers relaxed. The platform grew quiet. The tension in the air was heavy, like the moment before a storm. The frost beast huffed, then did something no one expected. It pressed its forehead against Ryan's hand. Light burst between them, a soft blue pulse that traveled from the beast's eyes into his chest. Ryan gasped as a wave of emotion hit him. Not pain, but connection. Images filled his mind. Glimpses of the beast's memories, of running through snow, of battles fought, of standing tall beside someone it trusted. When the vision faded, he opened his eyes to find himself sitting on its back, as if he had always belonged there. The platform erupted in noise. People shouted in amazement. Some applauded, others simply stared in shock. Valira rode up beside him, her face unreadable, but her eyes bright with emotion. "No one has ever done that," she said quietly. Ryan smiled. "I guess I'm full of surprises." She reached out and touched his arm. "You are more than that. You are something we didn't expect." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Then let's keep surprising them." She gave him a look that made his heart beat faster, then turned her mount. "Race me back to the tower?" she asked, her tone light but full of heat. "Afraid you'll lose?" he teased. They took off together, their frost beasts leaping from one shimmering platform to another, wind rushing past, their laughter echoing through the icy sky. Below, the world watched not a soldier and a warden, but two souls who had found something rare, something even more powerful than strength or wisdom. They had found trust. A full year had passed since Captain Ryan Thorne first stood outside the icy gates of Zephyrian, demanding entry into a world that had never welcomed outsiders. Now, he sat proudly astride his frost beast, Thunder, beside Valira and her mount, Crystal Wind, on the highest platform of the city. Below them, banners waved in the cold breeze, and the crystal halls sparkled under the twin suns. Warriors and diplomats from both Earth and the Etherian Empire had gathered to witness a moment that would be remembered for generations. the official uniting of two once-distant civilizations. Ryan looked out over the crowd, but his gaze always returned to Vylera. Her ceremonial armor gleamed with silver markings, symbols of her new role as co-commander of the United Forces. She turned to him with a smile that still managed to make his heart skip, even after everything they had been through. "Ready to make history?" she asked. "Only if I get to do it with you," he replied, his voice quiet but certain. The ceremony was filled with ancient rituals and new symbols. Human and Etherian cadets stood side by side, pledging unity and respect. Leaders from both worlds spoke of progress, peace, and partnership. But it was Ryan and Vylera who captured everyone's attention as they led their frost beasts into the arena, showing a flawless display of synchronized combat and control. Together, they moved as one, her spear slicing through the air, his sword gliding in perfect rhythm. Their mounts danced over the frozen floor, leaping and spinning with precision, a perfect balance of power and grace. Every motion told a story, not just of skill but of trust, of bond, of a journey that had started with challenge and turned into something greater. The crowd erupted in cheers, but for Ryan and Vylera the noise felt distant. They saw only each other, remembering every trial, every moment that brought them here. Later, as the celebration filled the halls with music and laughter, the two of them slipped away to the crystal garden high above the city. It had become their place. A quiet space where glowing flowers from both worlds bloomed side by side, a symbol of how far they had come. Vylera leaned into him as they sat on a bench carved from crystal and polished smooth by time. "Do you remember the first thing I said to you?" she asked. Ryan chuckled. "You told me I wasn't allowed to pass. You looked ready to throw me off the mountain." "I should have," she teased. "You were bold, reckless." "You liked it," he said, nudging her gently. She smiled. "I did. I just didn't know it yet." Her fingers reached up to trace the faint scar on his jaw, a mark from one of their earliest trials. "You were different from every human I'd ever met. You didn't want to conquer. You wanted to understand." He took her hand and kissed it. "And you were the first person who made me feel like proving myself was worth the pain." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind and the faint hum of the crystals around them. Their frost beasts lay nearby, curled together in sleep, as close as their riders had become. When the stars began to appear in the sky, Vylera turned to him again. "What now?" she asked. "Now," Ryan said, pulling her closer. "We write our own story. Together." She didn't answer with words. She kissed him, and in that moment, there were no titles, no duties, no barriers, only two hearts beating in time. What had begun as a mission of diplomacy had become a love story carved in ice and lit by stars. And though the galaxy still held challenges ahead, they would face them as one. Warrior and warrior. Bonded by choice, strengthened by trial, and guided by a love neither of them had expected, but both now believed in completely.